You know, in the huge, sprawling world of mythology, there are some figures who seem, well, pretty straightforward. And then there's Ravana. For a lot of people, he's just the bad guy, the 10-headed demon king. But that's just scratching the surface. Today, we're going to peel back the layers and explore the many, many faces of Ravana.
For millions, this is it. This is the Ravana they know. He's the main antagonist in the epic Ramayana, a king who is brilliant, absolutely, but also so arrogant that he kidnaps Sita, kicking off one of the most famous wars in all of literature. This is our starting point, the version of the story that sets the stage for everything else.
So, here's our roadmap. We'll start with that classic villain from the epic Trimal. Then we'll see how he's remembered as a powerful king. After that, we'll dig into the symbolism of the great scholar, see how he's been reinterpreted in modern times, and finally, try to understand why he remains such a fascinating, complex figure.
Okay, so let's begin where it all begins, the Ramayana. Because in this epic, Ravana isn't just some one-dimensional bad guy. He serves a really profound purpose in the story.
The epic gives us this really complex picture. On one hand, Ravana is a genius, a deep scholar. On the other, he completely crosses the line. His brilliance is something no one denies, but it's his pride, his hubris, that brings him down. His story becomes this massive cautionary tale about dharma, you know, that cosmic law of living right, and shows what happens when you decide you're above it all.
But what happens when we shift our perspective? When we look at this story from a different place, a different culture? Well, in Sri Lanka, a whole other version of Ravana comes to life, one that exists right alongside the epic story.
And this contrast is just fascinating. Where the Ramayana sees the villain, Sri Lankan folklore often sees a respected ruler, a brilliant leader, and a really potent symbol of local identity. And these aren't necessarily competing truths. They're just different traditions, showing how one figure can mean completely different things to different people.
What's really cool is that this memory of Ravana isn't just a story told around a fire, it's literally carved into the landscape of Sri Lanka. You have the incredible Ravana waterfalls, the mysterious peak of Lake Agala, the ancient forests of Ritagala. All of these places are connected to a story in local legends. The land itself becomes a keeper of his memory.
All right, so beyond the villain and the king, there's another powerful side to Ravana, the scholar. And this part of his identity is symbolized by, well, his most recognizable feature.
The 10 heads. It's the image everyone knows. But here's the thing. Almost everyone agrees this was never meant to be taken literally. It's a symbol, and a really deep one at that.
Well, according to a lot of interpretations, the 10 heads aren't meant to be literal at all. They're symbolic. They represent his incredible mastery over multiple fields of knowledge, starting with a deep understanding of governance, his grasp of complex philosophy, his expertise in medicine, his advanced knowledge of astronomy, his command over multiple languages, a deep appreciation and skill in music and the arts, and of course, a brilliant mind for military strategy. So when you see those 10 heads, don't just think monster, think master. They represent this ideal of a learned ruler, a person whose intellectual power was every bit as intimidating as his physical strength. This vast knowledge was his greatest asset, and in the Ramayana's telling, the very source of the pride that led to his downfall.
Genius even bled into the realm of mythic technology. You hear these legends about his flying chariot, the Vimana, which paints him as this symbol of incredible innovation. Now, scholars see this as a reflection of imagination, not actual history, but it just goes to show you how these stories captured the very peak of what people thought was possible.
Which brings us to a really important question. We've talked about him as a villain, a king, a scholar in these ancient stories, but why is he still such a hot topic of conversation right now, in the 21st century?
The answer is all about how he's being looked at today. In recent years, especially in post-colonial discussions, Ravana has been reclaimed and re-examined as this really powerful, modern symbol.
Yeah, in modern Sri Lankan thought, Ravana has had a major comeback. He's become this icon for indigenous ways of knowing that existed long before colonization. He represents political independence, a proud cultural heritage, and, in a way, a whole other version of history. Now, it's really important to understand that this modern revival isn't about trying to prove that Ravana was a real historical person. It's a much bigger, more interesting conversation. It's about who gets to tell the story. It makes us ask, how do power and perspective shape history? Whose version do we hear? Ravana has become the perfect figure to explore those exact questions.
So, after going through all these different takes, we end up with a much deeper, more complicated picture. It's time to pull all these different threads together.
His many faces are now crystal clear. In literature, he's the great villain. In cultural folklore, he's the respected king. Symbolically, he's the master scholar. And in the modern world, he's become this indigenous icon. The thing is, he isn't just one of these. He is all of them, all at the same time.
And that, right there, is the key takeaway. Ravana's real power, the reason his story has lasted for thousands of years, isn't about whether he was real or not. It's in the amazing ability of myth itself. He shows us how one character can hold so many different meanings, changing and evolving with the cultures that tell his story.
And so, the many faces of Ravana leave us with a pretty big question for ourselves. It's a powerful reminder to stop and ask, which stories do we choose to tell? Which histories do we believe? And maybe most importantly, whose truths do they really represent?